With. I'm in the booth with Corey Burkhart, and we've got round 13 action lined up for you right now between Jody Keith and Michael Cochran. Interesting here. We're getting the graphics populated for you, but I can tell you that Jody is playing the blue-red God Pharaoh's Gift deck, and you can see that Michael is, in fact, on Grixis Energy. We'll give them the green light to go ahead and start playing. And of note here, Corey, their records. They're both sitting at 10-2 coming into round 13 here, so they're on the edge.
Yep.
But if they can pick up a win or two, they might find themselves in the top 8, though a loss would effectively eliminate them from top 8 competition.
Yeah, you're right. A loss puts them out of contention here to top 8. I mean, still certainly a great finish if you can get a 12-3 finish at a Grand Prix. But both of these players, you know, they're right on the cusp. They're looking at the top 8 here. Really need a win in this round, a win in the next round, and then we'll see what happens. But you know, if you're in Jody's spot here, I'd be pretty happy with Bomat Courier to Walking Ballista here on the first 2 turns.
Right, and you know, this is one of the features of the blue-red God Pharaoh's Gift deck is that it has these cheap creatures, and the benefit of these as well is that it's very easy to get these into your graveyard whenever you want.
Yeah, so the big thing going on here with the blue-red God Pharaoh's Gift deck, if you haven't been following much this weekend, the goal of the deck is to come out sort of like an aggro deck in the sense where you have Bomat Couriers, Walking Ballistas, Firebrands, and start applying pressure to your opponent to get them on the back foot. And then you really want to leverage your Gate to the Afterlife to allow you to cycle through your deck when your creatures are dying, fill up your graveyard with creatures, sacrifice it, find a God Pharaoh's Gift, and then start bringing them back as 4/4s with, you know, all of their extra relevant special abilities.
And there are quite a few for that. If we get a chance to see it, I'll have you break that down for us. There's some shenanigans afoot with Combat Celebrant and such. In the meantime, Jody Keith is going to use Fanatical Firebrand as a removal spell. He didn't even bother putting it on the battlefield. Of course, it has haste, so tap it, sack it, do a damage to something. He decided to kill the Glint Sleeve Siphoner on the other side of the battlefield before that nonsense gets out of hand. It also gets him in for a couple points of damage, though usually the way these games end from Blue-Red's perspective isn't by chipping in for 1 or 2 with these little creatures.
Right, so what Jody's doing there, like, is part of the reason why the Blue-Red GPG deck has really picked up in popularity is Glint Sleeve Siphoner is one of the sort of pillars of the format, and answering that at an efficient rate is really, really important. The Firebrand here, you know, could chip in for some damage as we were talking, but being able to kill it for a single mana, getting ahead there, being able to potentially have double spelled. Jody didn't double spell that turn, but having the option available to you while also filling up his graveyard for the Gate to the Afterlife is going to put him in a really favorable position as the game progresses here.
And as you can see, things still progressing favorably for Jody Keith with the Champion of Wits being met by an Essence Scatter, but that's not all bad for him. That's 2 creatures in the graveyard plus 2 that he could put in the graveyard from the battlefield already. Of course, he needs 6 if he's going to activate Gate to the Afterlife. We haven't seen that yet out of him, but if that ends up coming into play, he is actually a good amount of the way there already, and for some reason, Hunter Cochran just doesn't have a whole lot going on here.
So I think part of the problem here going on for Hunter is he's worried about what this Bomat Courier is going to bring. Jody's really leveraging the Bomat Courier game plan here. He's probably going to get 4 or 5 cards off of it. And Hunter's also sitting there with, you know, 3 black-red producing lands and just an Ether Hub for blue mana. And with a single energy left, he sort of has to pick his spot here in terms of where he's going to crack it. And Hunter here is firing off that Contempt, trying to prevent as many cards from getting into Jody's hand as possible.
Now, that was a draw step Contempt, is that correct?
Yeah, so one of the key spots there is you want as many cards in the enemy player's hand when you try to kill their Bomat Courier to keep as many resources away. So a draw step there by Hunter prevents Jody from ending up this turn with 5 cards in his hand. Instead, he only has the 3 that he had to discard, and then he picked up 4 off the Bomat Courier.
One of the cards was God Pharaoh's Gift going into the graveyard, but of course, if he does find a Gate to the Afterlife, it can search it up from any of the zones, his hand, his library, or his graveyard. So that's not a bad place for it to be necessarily. Oh!
Speaking of.
There it is.
So let's see, we've got 3 creatures in the graveyard now because the Bomat Courier was sacrificed and didn't get exiled to the Contempt. There's a Walking Ballista in play, so we can theoretically get to 4 at any time we want. And if Jody then has any way to, you know, has extra creatures in his hand that he can loot away, he's very, very close to either getting that God Pharaoh's Gift out of his deck or out of his graveyard.
Yeah, if it comes down to it, he also has an Ipnu Rivulet on the battlefield that he could use to take a shot at getting even more creatures into his yard. In the meantime, the mana woes continue here for Hunter Cochran, who has been little bit under the gun as far as blue mana goes, though he does have a nice answer here with a Braid. This is before Jody even gets to untap, so that gate to the afterlife apparently leads directly to the graveyard, at least for now.
Yeah, and taking care of that right then and there is pretty important for Hunter. He doesn't want to let Jody potentially untap, play multiple creatures, and then say, okay, at the end of your turn, I'll Braid that. Potentially leaving himself more options open if he ever asks his Contempt or maybe an Essence Scatter. He still leaves open Essence Scatter in this line, but he doesn't want to let Jody have more options available to himself. So taking care of that before Jody sees more cards. The only option he had was, do I want to try to sacrifice my Walking Ballista to get a Luton?
Ooh, here, this is going to help him out as well. Champion of Wits. Again, another card that's good at filling up the graveyard, sometimes even just going to the graveyard itself for value. And in this case, perhaps finding him another copy of Gate to the Afterlife or just more powerful threats. Looks like he's going to discard. Well, he's still thinking. Looks like a couple of Marauders in hand, though. The Kite Marauder, a card that had not seen play in Standard until this deck came around, but it's kind of been an all-star. I've seen him do some pretty tricky stuff.
It really shines with any of the, we call them ping effects, any effect that deals 1 point of damage, so Walking Ballista and the Fanatical Firebrand. The ability to take out indestructible creatures, to take out the gods. The two cards combine really, really effectively with one another. And again, it leads into that sort of the chip damage plan where instead of having to then leverage God Pharaoh's Gift for multiple turns like the white-blue deck does, sometimes you just kill them out of nowhere in a single turn.
Yeah, and we have seen that, by the way. Jody has still been chipping away. Hunter Cochran all the way down to 12. This is a little bit of desperation, perhaps, for Cochran here. He's going to fire off Supreme Will, maybe just digging for another blue source. He now has no blue mana available.
He's really looking for a Drowned Catacombs or a Fetid Pools here to try to turn around. I see 2 blue cards in that pile. Is there a blue mana-producing land?
You don't count Search for Azcanta, right?
I do when I already have blue mana, and I have 7 cards in my graveyard.
Oh, no. I don't think there was, Corey.
All right, well,
yeah. What
if Jody has the 7th land in hand here, he's going to get to embalm that Champion of Wits, and we're going to see, 4 new cards here for Jody.
Yeah,
he's also going to get to potentially drop Hunter down to 9 this turn.
Yeah, if he does get to Eternalized Champion as well, it just very relevantly is adding a 4/4 body to the battlefield, let alone the nonsense that it unlocks.
Yeah, and if we take a look here, it's going to actually be pretty difficult with the number of Harness Lightnings, and Hunter has no energy remaining. Dealing with a 4/4 is actually going to be somewhat tricky. He's going to have to probably spend his whole turn Vraska's Contempting it, even if he has access to one in his hand.
Goodness sakes, not looking good for Hunter. This draw has just not come together.
Oof.
Oh, and there's another Gate to the Afterlife for Jody. And after having discarded the 2 Marauders last turn, he does have 6 creatures, right? 1, 2, 3, 5.
Just 5.
Okay. Now he can obviously get one there with the Walking Ballista at instant speed whenever he wants.
So Jody actually took a somewhat conservative line there by not sacrificing off his Ballista to then get a 6th creature in the graveyard and then sacrificing the gate to get the God Pharaoh's Gift back.
Is that a nod to another copy of a Braid?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So he's saying, okay, I'm beating you on the battlefield. You're currently stalled off of blue mana. I can actually just leverage the sizes of my creatures here and potentially kill you that way. So what I would expect Jody to do here, like he did, he added a counter to his Ballista. This is going to threaten to put Hunter down to 5, and then eternalize that Champion of Wits and, put a 4/4 on the battlefield like you and I were talking where, okay, now he's got 8 power. He's got, Hunter down to 5. You need to answer that Champion, but then if he spends his whole turn Vraska's Contempting that on the following turn, he can just put an extra counter on the Walking Ballista and potentially end the game that way. Jody actually drew a Firebrand here, so he's actually considering this allows him to also potentially level up the Walking Ballista. So
Jody Keith is on the cheap creature beatdown plan, and I think he's just going to go for another counter here as well.
Yeah, that presents lethal damage. All right, yep, that meets the Abrade.
But Jody says, well, I'm going to get you coming or going here because I'm going to remove these counters and still get in for 3 damage.
So Hunter in this whole exchange is going to take 5 damage. There's going to be a Gate to an Afterlife trigger, so Jody's going to gain a life and basically mill himself for a card. Jody's in the luxury spot here, if you will. If he's going to be able to still use that gate and then have up the Champion of Wits activation. Ooh, there we go. All right. Hunter found her second blue land, so we may actually have a game here on our hands where I thought this was going to spiral away a few turns ago.
So what does it look like if Hunter Cochran is able to come back? What are the key cards to look for here?
Torrential Gearhulk's the big one on my mind right now, as there's a few very important spells sitting in his graveyard. If he can, get the 5/6 body onto the battlefield, use the Torrential Gearhulk ability to cast the Abrade for free, killing a God Pharaoh's Gift, it'll outsize all of Jody's creatures, and potentially Hunter might be able to turn the game around with just one or two more spells here. But I think it's going to be, do or die here. All right, there's the Gearhulk.
Okay. Is he obliged to just abrade away the God Pharaoh's
gift
here?
You can't let him get back a Kite Marauder and get in for 4 in the air. So really needs a Fated Gift. Oh, there's a gate.
Oh, and he can just run it out there with only 1 mana available for Hunter Cochran. There's nothing he can do, and that's going to be game 1 going to Jody. Keith's got a big smile on his face. And why not? He is up a game, sitting at 10-2, pretty late in the day here on what is day 2 of the Standard GP. I know, yesterday you didn't see any Standard. That's because we were bringing you day 2 of Legacy. We jumped right into the deep end of the pool here, though, on a Sunday to try to get caught up on what exactly is going on in Standard. And so far, the talk of the town has been blue-red God Pharaoh's Gift, but the usual suspects are here as well. Grixis Energy in the hands of Hunter Cochran. And you got to feel like he could have put up a better fight if he would have been able to find his mana a little bit sooner. It did come back to bite him there. And Jody Keith was able to play ultimately a pretty fair game plan and just chip away at Hunter Cochran's life total. When he finally got his feet under him, it was too late, and Jody Keith is up 1-0. Why don't we talk about sideboards here, Corey? What are you seeing over there for Hunter?
So actually for Hunter, we're looking at 2 Magma Sprays here as one of the absolute key cards. Jody's all about trying to put his creatures into the graveyard, using their abilities to help get them there on Bomat Courier and Walking Ballista and the Firebrand. Magma Spray is going to help deal with things like the Marauder, so he doesn't run into that situation where he taps out for a big creature, a GPG potentially comes down, the turn he doesn't have a Braid open, and gets in for 4 in the air. The Magma Spray is going to do double duty in terms of taking out the tricky creatures to deal with, and in terms of keeping the Gate to the Afterlife sort of on the back burner. He's also potentially got a few copies here. He's got 3 copies of Doomfall, 2 copies of Duress, which I don't expect to come in here.
Okay.
But I do potentially expect the Whirler Virtuosos. One thing that's going on here with Hunter's deck list is that while he's sort of this Grixis between control and energy list, he's not playing any copies of Whirler Virtuoso in his main deck, which is actually pretty surprising. The Whirler Virtuosos, there's the pair of them sitting in the sideboard. I expect those to come in to help deal with the early beatdown, give him the time to bridge to his Chandras, to his Scarab Gods, potentially Gonti, Gearhulks, and then really leverage his much more powerful gameplay here.
Yeah, who actually has the stronger late game between the 2 decks? Because we know that Jody Keith's deck is not messing around in the late game either.
It's definitely going to be Hunter's. Hunter has 4 copies of Abrade. If he can actually get to the point of the game where he is sitting with mana open, maybe has a threat on the battlefield, has flipped to search for Iskanta and Iskanta the Sunken Ruin, he's just going to be leveraging his 4 Magma Sprays, 4 Braids, and just much more powerful creature suite, Planeswalker suite.
Okay, take a look at Jody Keith's sideboard here. Is there anything that jumps out that he may want to bring in?
So the first thing that I usually look for out of the God Pharaoh's Gift decks is any copies of Jace's Defeat against the Scarab God decks. However, unlike the blue-white gift, the blue-red gift mostly wants to try to get under the Scarab God. The Jace's Defeats here are still going to be somewhat important, answering cards like Torrential Gearhulk and Commit Memory, as Memory is actually one of the better cards against the gift decks at recycling those graveyards to eliminate the creature counts, eliminate the threat counts, if you will. I don't think I'm going to see... You might see Silent Gravestone as it eliminates Torrential Gearhulk and the Scarab God activations. I'll be honest, sideboarding with Jody Keith's deck here is much trickier than it is the traditional blue-white God Pharaoh's Gift decks or many of the energy decks that I've played with in this format.
Yeah, it is interesting because, one of the things that really jumps off the page if you look at the deck list from Jody Keith, and really any deck centered around the card Gate to the Afterlife, is the number of creatures, right? I mean, these are all creatures, and then there's Gate to the Afterlife and God Pharaoh's Gift, and that's kind of it. You don't have a lot of wiggle room to bring in counterspells, removal, that kind of thing.
Right, like, I certainly would expect that he wants to be bringing in Spell Pierce against the deck with 4 mana, Vraska's Contempt's Commit Memories.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, what are you going to cut here? It looks like Combat Celebrant's probably pretty low in terms of the quality of creatures. It's going to be just dying to an Abrade or a Magnet Spray or Harness Lightning at a mana inefficient rate. And I think Spell Pierce will probably be one of the cards that he brings in. Depending on how Jody actually sees the games playing out, what he expects from Hunter, he could theoretically bring in cards like Whirler Virtuosa, but I think that's too much of a small ball game. And what he wants to be doing is applying pressure much earlier with the Bomat Couriers, with the Fanatical Firebrands, to try to get Hunter to commit to the board, start tapping out so that he can then get a Gate in there, potentially get a God Pharaoh's Gift out just for that single turn.
Okay. Yeah, Combat Celebrant is one of the ways that the deck that Jody Keith's playing, this blue-red God Pharaoh's Gift deck, can really slam the door on the game late. I was having a chat earlier with Reed about the fact that it doesn't have Angel of Invention, and that's a card that we'll often see God Pharaoh's Gift type decks lean on to get them out of a bind, right? They get really far behind, and then it's like, bang, hit you with this, and all of a sudden they're either even or ahead.
Right, the general GPG strategy for the blue-white and previously Jeskai versions is you give up the early game for the idea that I'm going to overpower you with these very, very powerful angels. Mm-hmm. What the blue-red God Pharaoh's Gift deck is all about is, no, I've got a bunch of creatures that I can play in the early game, sort of imitate an aggro deck, if you will, and be applying pressure in the meantime, and then just use God Pharaoh's Gift as a way to close the door. So another card that I would expect Jody probably is going to bring in is Padim to prevent his Gate to the Afterlife and God Pharaoh's Gifts from getting, shatter-moded, if you will, from a Braid.
Right. So we're off to the races here in game number 2, and a decent start for both players. It looks like Hunter Cochran kicked things off with Search for Azcanta, then found a target for his Harness Lightning the next turn with a Bomat Courier. But there's a second Bomat Courier on the battlefield for Jody Keith, which already has 2 cards under it. So Hunter Cochran's going to want to try to take care of that as soon as he can. And there's the Kite Marauder as well. Now, on its own, fine, right? A 2-powered attacker, has flying. But in conjunction with cards like Walking Ballista, the thing has really proven itself to be kind of a neat card in Standard that took a little while to get here.
Yeah, as we were talking about ways to take out Hazoret, like turning off the abilities of Indestructible, killing off your Hazoret, eliminating the gods. I mean, killing a Torrential Gearhulk. These are all different things that can the Kite Marauder can team up with another creature to effectively eliminate much scarier threats, if you will. Here, Jody, unfortunately, is losing a second Bomat Courier, stalled on 2 lands to Hunter's now 4, and Hunter's going, full long game here with both of his enchantments.
That's right. He's got Argoel's Bloodfast on the battlefield as well. Now, that's not quite as good as we've seen it earlier in the day. We saw that in a control mirror where the players can feel free to draw 10, 9, 8, 6 cards off of it over the course of a few turns, maybe even gain some life and get more cards later. Here, that's not going to be the case. As you can see, Jody Keith is applying fairly significant pressure with 4 power in the air, though that is going to be reduced back down to 2 thanks to Vraska's Contempt, and Hunter's going to go back up to 16 life. And now Jody Keith is going to drop the hammer. Fanatical Firebrand.
Yeah, Hunter basically has the game in a perfect spot here. He's managed to trade 1-for-1 with the early threats. He's got both of his enchantments going. He's about to transform Search for Azcanta. He's going to start drawing cards here with the Bloodfast. And Jody, sitting over there with 2 lands. Hunter's at 13 life. Yeah, and we're seeing here it's turn 6, and Hunter's like, all right, let's start drawing some cards.
Let's get some cards off of the Bloodfast. You can see that he's got 6 cards in his graveyard, so we could see the Search for Azcanta transform here shortly, as early as next turn. Jody, though, with the major mana issues here, as now we've got 6 lands to 2, and even though Jody has been ahead for the duration of this game thanks to his cheap threats, you can't figure that they're going to be able to outlast the card draw plus mana advantage that Hunter has.
Yeah, I think Hunter's Dragon Skull Summit there should have come into play tap, but I think Jody now with 6 cards.
Yeah,
still
you're
in his
right.
hand.
It actually should have.
Yeah.
We might be able to mention that, because this actually has let him leave up 2 mana at this juncture that might matter. His Dragon Skull Summit came in untapped, but I don't see a mountain or a swamp.
I think Jody here...
We're going to let them know down in the feature match area just in case there's something that we can do. It's a tricky spot for us in the coverage booth because, of course, we want to make sure that the tournament integrity is held to the highest, but at the same time, we have to have rules around how we actually interact with these things. Yeah, see, this is mattering right now because he's got an extra mana, so hopefully we can... we may have missed the window. Hopefully they can get them stopped. And yeah, so the way this works, by the way, for those of you watching at home, is that we go through the judges. This is, as a coverage team, we're here to bring you all the exciting moments and the cool deck lists and everything, but the one thing we really, really don't want to do, if at all possible, is interfere with the tournament itself. That is something that we're very, very, very reluctant to do. So the judges, of course, who are on staff to help manage the tournament are who we go to for it. But as you might imagine, by the time you notice it in the booth, Corey, I make a passive call out to our director, who then has to radio down to our coverage person and then pull a judge aside. It can take a minute to actually get it happening, and that's what's happened here. Though it does look like we have the judge hands, this is what it looks like on coverage, Corey, right? Is you see a hand pointing and clearly explaining something, and a judge is in here.
Thankfully, Hunter's very experienced at playing, these sort of grindy mid-rangey and control decks. He actually had his hands separated fully across the table, and both players are just immediately like, yeah, that's the card. It hasn't been fully put into his hand, so we should be able to
Might
to
be a
correct this one.
rewindable situation.
Yeah. We'll give Hunter back his 2 points of life here, and that'll be the card that he'll be looking at with a Search for Iskanta on the stack. If not, maybe we'll be shuffling it just to randomize the order again.
Right, and so, this is an interesting one because sometimes it doesn't end up mattering, right? Like sometimes Jody goes, Combat Celebrant, and Hunter goes, it resolves, and he goes, go, and he goes, okay, cool, untap, draw, and it's like, whatever. Now, even then, this is me, I'm pretty picky about this stuff, but the difference between having 2 mana up and 1 still could affect how Jody approaches his turn, so I would still want to see it addressed if possible.
Right.
But here, it actually did matter. He tapped the mana to use Argwell's Bloodfast on end step. That's an entire card and 2 life. That could absolutely change the way that this game plays out. So.
Totally. I do think that Jody ends up making the, sort of best play that he possibly can either way, knowing that Hunter is at 10 life. He's like, okay, I'm going to put my 4-power creature on the battlefield, threaten a 2-turn clock.
Right.
Maybe this can get Hunter to draw fewer cards, and then he can use his blue utility creatures here in Champion of Wits and Trophy Mage to then sort of guide the game plan based on how this Combat Celebrant ends up working on the next turn.
Right. Yeah. And we've seen this time and time again, especially among high-level players like Jody Keith, which is the further behind they are, the more likely they are to take risk. Right? He does not have the luxury of saying, well, I'll just cast a test spell and see if you counter it. Like, having missed all these land drops and just finally hit land number 3, it's go time.
Right.
Jody needs to just start slamming his best threats and hoping that Hunter Cochran doesn't have the answers for it. Now, right now, we're still in the middle of a bit of a judge call here. It's taken a few minutes for the judge. And this is normal. Rewinding a game state is not as simple as you think. Now, if you and I were playtesting, Corey, and I said, oh, wait a minute, I don't actually have this land, you would just be like, cool, just put the card back on top. I might change my decision knowing that you only have like 1 blue up, and then we would just continue.
Right.
But that's not how judges approach it, because if they were simply to just do that, it could absolutely have an adverse effect on how a game plays out. So they have to hold to their subset of rules, and that's what's happening here. And that's why a lot of people are just like, well, why don't you just put the card back and just say go? Well, it's not quite that simple when you're trying to adhere to the judges.
Right, and we just saw Hunter there flip over the mountain in his hand. He's like, yeah, had I realized my Dragon Skull Summit wouldn't have come into play on tap, they would have played my mountain and then played the Dragon Skull Summit the next turn. He's just like, yeah, this is an honest mistake, I wasn't trying to do anything. That's another thing the judges will be looking at, like, okay, what caused this to occur, what may have been happening. And like you said, if you're just hanging out playing with your friends, like we were playing Brawl last night, it's like, yeah, just change whatever you're doing. Like, it's okay. Here there's the tournament integrity is on the line. Like, players are playing for lots of pro points, tons of money, the trophy at the end of the day. Like, we want to make sure that everything is going to be conducted at the highest possible level.
That's right. And of course, this is an important match for these players, truly of the highest order. We have round 13 with both players at 10-2. So a loss here is effectively eliminating you from top 8 competition. And so that's the situation where you really want to make sure that everything lines up exactly how it goes. Now, another thing that I should mention, by the way, is that the judges will conduct a short interview with the players, which is what we actually were seeing with the hand, and what's probably concluding right now is that you and I were watching every turn of that whole game, right?
Yep.
You were all over it. You're like, oh, that thing shouldn't have come into play untapped, and we're up to speed. But remember, as a judge may have just come off of a ruling from another complicated board state. They have to come in and get fully brought up to speed about what's going on. And the way that they do that is by asking the players, often individually. Yeah, and Hunter's showing him now exactly what happened. And again, the result of this, though, will be that the judge will conclude whether this is a rewindable situation or not.
It looks like to me what they concluded was that because the card hit Hunter's hand, they're going to bind him to paying the 2 life and drawing the card, and the players are just, it seemed like functionally agreeing that, okay, he can just play his mountain. I don't know how much that was that the judge ruled something or the players mutually agreed, like, oh, he could have just played his mountain that turn. But Hunter ends up finding his Sweltering Suns there, cleans up the battlefield. Jody's going to try to rebuild Hero Champion Wits, hoping to find a land and a threat here. I think his best follow-up would be a Bomat Courier, potentially. Jody really wants to try to leverage. It looks like there's a Walking Ballista in his hand, maybe trying to push forward 4 to 6 more damage and then finish off the game with, those ping effects we were talking about, the Ballistas and the Firebrands, to see if he can finish off Hunter here. Maybe Hunter will spend some more life for him.
By the way, you were right, Corey. The ruling was that they ended up leaving the game state as is.
Okay.
In other words, they decided that it wasn't rewindable. It wasn't a situation that they felt like they could reliably rewind it. Now, the Sweltering Suns, though, pretty big play there for Hunter Cochran. Jody Keith digging for lands with Champion of Wits now. Hunter at a precarious 8 life, but we're going to start seeing him activate Azcanta the Sunken Ruin. And this is where the value train picks up one passenger and usually doesn't stop. Did he just whiff, though?
He saw Scarab God and 3 lands go to the bottom.
Oh, no.
He even, showed Jody the
value train went right by. He's like, hey, I'm here.
Next stop, the bottom of the library.
Wow.
But Hunter still has so much going on for him here with 9 lands, Azcanta, the Bloodfast. Now he's cycling a Canyon Slough. Jody is not out of this by any means, but Hunter is sort of driving the action, if you will, with he's got the ability to see so many more cards than Jody does. But again, Hunter's only at 8. It's not out of the woods just yet. Ooh, and a Magma Spray.
Magma Spray was the result of 2 Canyon Sloughs getting cycled eventually. You got to figure that Jody's got to find some lands at some point here. He keeps casting Champion of Wits. Where are these lands for him?
I bet you Jody's thinking the same thing right now.
Right. I mean, he cast one last turn, still didn't find a land. What's going on here?
And it looks like because he's so land light here, he's going to actually be discarding a gate potentially. Just doesn't have the time here to wait and deploy a 3-mana artifact and not be able to commit anything extra to the board to make Hunter sort of spend his turns escanting and using the Bloodfast.
Now, he is feeling extreme pressure here, right? Jody is.
Yeah.
Because he needs to shut the door before search for Azcanta and Bloodfast. Get him.
Yeah, exactly as you said. Hunter is the one with 9 lands, 2 different ways to, see or draw extra cards from his library here. While Jody is the one, putting Hunter under life total pressure, the game is about to spiral out of control. Hunter there draws up to 3 cards, goes into 4 life to transform into Temple
of Oklazats?
Oklazats?
That's what they pay me the big bucks for, buddy.
Thank goodness you know the pronunciations.
Snapped it off. Is that what he wants, though?
If he ends up finding a Scarab God or a Torrential Gear Hulk, potentially even a Whirler Virtuoso, I mean, he would obviously much rather like the size of the body here to block some creatures. But as time goes on, he'll want a way to withstand a potential Walking Ballista coming down the pipe.
Chandra Torch of Defiance is going to clear the board once again. And even though the life totals don't look like it, this one's really starting to swing in Hunter Cochran's direction. It's going to be very difficult for Jody Keith to overcome all of this value.
Hunter is empty-handed here, I think, and I believe he's actually down at 4 points of life here. So
is he at 4, actually?
I think so. I thought he paid twice with the Temple, and I mean, it requires you to have 5 or fewer life points to transform it there. So
yeah,
I think if Jody actually has a 5th untapped mana source, he might be able to just gate, turn it into a God Pharaoh's Gift, and if Hunter doesn't have Negate, Supreme Will, or an Abrade, that might just do it.
He's going to go for Walking Ballista for 2, which would give him the chance to kill Chandra and still have a threat on the battlefield.
And Hunter can't actually use his Escanta here and leave up Essence Scatter, so okay, he's going to cycle the Canyon Salute to potentially hit an Essence Scatter to protect his Chandra. Looked like that was a negate, so this Ballista is going to have the option to take out Chandra.
It does so immediately.
Yeah, can't let Hunter draw even more cards here.
This is a big one, though. He keeps showing him the Scare of God. He's like, that's the only one I actually want to find, and he keeps seeing them with his Escanta the Sunken Ruin activations, and it looks like he's going to have to settle for a Magma Spray. Put Scare of God on top.
If I were in Hunter's seat, I would certainly not complain about having a cheap removal spell to get this Ballista off the battlefield. Again, if Jody can actually spend his 4 mana on the next turn, put the counter on the Ballista, attack, and then use both the counters on the Ballista, that would finish Hunter off. So Hunter's in this position where he basically needs to answer every threat Jody comes up with until the game ends. I would say Hunter's in a good position to be able to do that, but
this is my favorite part of Magic. When you're almost dead, but you have a lot of advantage going for you. This is the sweat, right?
Yeah, this is the living life on the edge and using every part of the buffalo as
right.
I heard it called.
That is correct. So let's see if Hunter can do it, because he's now down to 3 after that Walking Ballista pinged him for 1. Jody Keith up a game here in round number 13 and looking to close this one out. But that 3 life might prove very difficult. It will not take much for Hunter Cochran to turn this thing right back on him.
Yeah, we're seeing Jody check the graveyards here. He's just trying to get some kind of idea of what cards Hunter could be holding on to, what cards he's seen before. Like last game we were talking, he saw Supreme Will. It's like, okay, well, how best do I get around that card? Jody's trying to figure out what's my best route to victory, what's going to leave me the best way to win the game if the game happens to go 1 more turn, 2 more turns, or even 6 more turns.
There's that negate that you saw a couple turns ago, Corey. That's going to hit the gate to the afterlife, so that's not going to work.
And this is going to...
Should we call it negate to the afterlife?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll pass on that one. We'll
D+.
work on it. We'll work on it. He does, though, have a follow-up.
Not the greatest of
follow-ups. Not the greatest. It's a 3-turn clock. What do you want?
I was hoping for a Bomat Kerr, I guess, if I were Jody, or even a Firebrand.
Fair.
All right, so Hunter does find the Supreme Will. It'll actually be interesting to see if, because, we're playing such a long game here, usually at this point in the game, Supreme Will is going to be used for its ability to, as we call it, impulse, see the top 4 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand. But with Jody stuck on 4 lands, all right, nope, he's just going to fire it off, try to find some additional answers here. That is one of Hunter's better cards in this spot, I would say.
Right.
2 bodies for 3 mana allows him to leave up, both of his transformed lands there, potentially gaining him some life, searching for additional spells. I think we might just be verifying energy counts here.
Yeah, he has himself at 2 going up to 5 with the Whirler.
This is getting dicier and dicier here for Jody. He really needs to stick a gate and transform it, or sacrifice it into, a God Pharaoh's Gift. There's that 5th land. Oh, I think he really needed a follow-up play there.
It really felt like it, didn't it?
Yeah, this is sort of where Escanta the Sunken Ruin really turns the corners, when your opponent's not applying pressure into you. When they're allowing you to consistently just impulse through your library, find all of your answers, and then eventually figure out where your threats are at and draw into those. That's when the game truly spirals out of control here.
There's a Thopter now for Hunter. He has a long way to go to actually get Jody Keith dead, but if he can get this board fully stabilized. Remember, he also does have the Temple, and that can help buffer his life total here as well. Wouldn't call it Plan A, but
I don't know how much the decking you strategy is actually going to work out for Jody.
Did he just do that against Hunter?
Yeah, usually when you start doing that, that's the I'm admitting defeat. I wanted to see more cards from your library here before you actually kill me.
The informational Minister of Inquiries.
As, with Scarab God and Torrential Gearhulk in the deck, you really don't want to be filling up your opponent's graveyard with more options.
Right.
All right, Hunter's now showing him, hi, I have an Abrade. I'm going to hold this up the rest of the game so you won't be able to get me with the God Pharaoh's Gift.
Yeah, that actually takes care of a lot of the outs that Jody Keith has, some of his more powerful plays. And this Whirler Virtuoso is going to town. Another 3 damage.
Up to 7 mana. Do we have any Champion of Wits in there? I think there's 1.
Yeah, he played 1 earlier. One of them got exiled, but he does have 1 in his yard.
A little bit of a refuel action here for Jody, potentially.
This is a big play. It's bigger than anything on the battlefield. It doesn't die to Abrade, and he does get to reload.
Yeah, it's potential that this Champion of Wits is actually going to, gain him a serious number of card advantage. Whether or not it can actually get him across the finish line, that's going to be a different story here. But he definitely has some cards in his hand that he wants to get rid of. There's the Spell Pierce sitting in Jody's hand. We're looking at Hunter with, goodness gracious, that 11 lands on the battlefield.
Yeah.
So Jody's certainly going to be able to turn his weak hand here into something. It's a matter of, is he going to be able to find the tools to actually get around all of Hunter's answers?
I'm going to say no.
That's my expectation also,
right,
but enough Firebrands and enough Walking Ballistas, and if Hunter isn't holding on to copies of Essence Scatter, and he could actually make something happen here.
But can't Hunter just gain life by sacrificing Virtuoso or now like a Gearhulk?
Well, before the Gearhulk came down, the Virtuoso was only 3 life against a 4/4, but yeah, the Gearhulk casting a Contempt here, gaining 2 life for Hunter. He gets up to 5. Now he's threatening, a 2-turn clock.
Game.
Yeah, Jody's like, all right, let's draw some more lands and get into a 3rd game here.
Yeah, that was a tough beat there for Jody Keith. I mean, we have to remember going back, that was not an explosive draw for Hunter. It took him a really long time to actually get his engines running and get that card advantage going. In the meantime, Jody missed a lot of land drops that game. Remember when he cast Champion of Wits and still was just like, go?
I mean, he missed his 2nd land drop.
Yeah.
I believe he missed his 4th, so it would have been land number 3 on turn 4 also. Jody was fighting an uphill battle there, but his hand definitely looks like it had the contents that you want in the Grixis, energy control hybrid matchup where he's on the draw. The games are going to get a lot tougher. Hunter is the full set of sprays, the full set of braids. Hunter came prepared to fight this blue-red God Pharaoh's Gift deck. If I'm in Jody's seat, I like the keep. You let the chips fall where they may in terms of, you didn't draw your 2nd land there. You knew you were going to be fighting an uphill battle in terms of your land drops, but he had a ton of threats, able to fill up his graveyard, and he consistently applied pressure to Hunter. And as you said, turn 8-9 rolled around, Hunter had 2 enchantments on the battlefield, and we still didn't know who was, truly ahead in that game.
Mm-hmm. So, Jody Keith the favorite here. He's on the play. He is facing, as you mentioned, a fully sideboarded version of what can be, a control deck. But at the same time, you got to feel like if he would have hit a land or 2 somewhere in that middle stages, that he might have been able to get Hunter just those 3 life lower.
It's certainly going to be close to me. I would prefer to be on Hunter's side of the matchup, but I do believe the matchup's really close, and I think a lot of it's
going to... You're not biased with that, right? I mean, you
saw
the word Grixis.
Not whatsoever. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, just asking, making sure, since you're in the booth now, that you're completely unfettered from any prior biases coming.
I do believe that the 4 sprays do help Hunter here a lot. The copies
really
of Sweltering Sun, the Abrades, if he can bridge the mid-game. A lot of it is he does need to line up his spells properly, and we saw his mana base do some serious damage to him there where, he didn't find any of his Canyon Sluice or Fetid Pools in the early game to get his Drowned Catacombs or Dragon Skull Summits onto the battlefield untapped up until turn 8 there. I do believe that I still think that Hunter has the better of the matchup in terms of if he can line up his answers. But Jody also has, cards like Bomat Courier, which if they come down and they get a couple attacks in and Jody's able to turn his hand into a new one, I think cards like Bomat Courier allow Jody to be a favorite. So I think it's going to come down to a lot of what Jody's, top 10 cards look like, how quick of a start he can get out to, and then how quickly he can refuel going into the mid-game.
Okay, let's keep an eye on that as we work our way into the third game. I mentioned it earlier, but a lot on the line for these players. This is a win and stay alive or a lose, and you're hoping for the pro points and the cash, but you're not going to be making the top 8. And we have keeps from both players, and we're underway. Jody Keith with that perfect start that you just outlined, Corey. He's got the Bomat Courier.
He's got his first 4 lands, so what he really needs to do here, Hunter, no Magma Spray on turn 1. He needs to follow up. Ooh. Did you see that draw?
No.
A Marauder off the top for Jody.
Wow.
So he's going to have the 1-2 punch here that he really needs, and he's going to be applying that sort of maximum pressure, and he's going to want to hopefully get this Bomat to survive to the 3rd or 4th card, be able to play out all of his lands, and then cash it in. All right, Hunter here with a pretty slow, long game developing start. He's going to be really looking to play a Sweltering Suns here on turn 3 to catch up with what Jody's got going on the battlefield.
This is slow for Hunter, though, isn't it?
Yeah, this is the kind of hand that I want only when I have a Sweltering Suns to follow up.
Okay, well, let's see if that's the case for Hunter Cochran, because the Sweltering Suns here would do some serious damage, taking out 3 creatures on the other side from Jody Keith. No, but it is a Whirler Virtuoso. That's not bad. Oh! Jace's Defeat is going to counter it and keep the beats flowing here for Jody Keith. Also, we are keeping an eye on the clock. They're under 9 minutes. That last game went forever. This one might not last as long. Oh, boy.
No, Jody's looking to make quick work of this one. I believe he only has 1 or 2 cards left in his hand. There's 4 underneath that Bomat Courier. Now, even a Sweltering Suns, sure, it's going to clean up this really scary battlefield, but Hunter's going to have to deal with whatever's underneath that Courier. All right, scratch that. Can I take the blue-red GPG side now of the matchup?
Yes.
This has been a great start from Jody.
All right, looks like they had an extension thanks to that judge call, so we've corrected the clock. It's at 16 minutes, plenty of time here, and there's a Canyon Slough getting cycled from Hunter Cochran.
Hunter needs to have a Magma Spray here, otherwise this Combat Celebrant's going to get exerted, and we're going to see multiple combat stops.
That's what's happening. Is this game?
This looks like lethal damage to me.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Game. And that's going to do it. Jody Keith with an explosive draw here in game number 3 keeps his top 8 dreams alive. Hunter Cochran, well, he has top 8'd a few GPs in the last few years, but he's not going to be a top 80 in this one. Still, he has a great shot at a solid finish for cash, some pro points, and have a productive weekend under his belt. But his dream of a top 8 is going to die here in round number 13.
That was impressive stuff by Jody. That he really made sort of academic work there of Hunter in game 3.
Yeah, especially after how game 1 went, when it was such a battle for him to really scrap it out with the lands and that kind of thing. So great stuff from the feature match area. Of course, we're in MTG Red Zone here from Seattle. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. That's Corey Burkhart. We've got him just for the round in the booth, but it's been really fun having you in so far, Corey. Thanks for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and we've got his insight as we work our way through round number 13. 2 more rounds of Swiss to bring you today, and after that, of course, we're going to be cutting to the top 8. We're giving away a trophy by the end of the day as well. This is a double trophy day yesterday, and now one today back-to-back. We're playing day 2s of both Legacy yesterday and now Standard today. We're actually going to have a word with Jody Keith, who's kind of running the tables with this blue-red deck, and we'll ask him whatever we want. You have any questions for him?
I would like to know what he was thinking there in game number 2, keeping that one land of that Courier hand. What his sort of feeling of how he needed to approach the matchup.
Sure. Well, let's ask him now. It sounds like he's ready down in the feature match area. Jody, Marshall Sutcliffe with Corey Burkhart in the booth. Nice victory there, my friend.
Thank you, Marshall.
So Corey was wondering what was going through your mind there during game number 2, the one where you struggled with your land drop so much.
When I kept the 7 with the one-lander with the Bomat. Well, I figured that I was on the draw and I was up a game. And you generally, if you get a counterspell with the Bomat, they're only playing one spell a turn. You can really run them down early. And I had a 2-drop also. So if I caught the second land, I didn't have a second 1-drop, so it was a little sketchy to keep. But I felt that I'm not that experienced with Standard. I'm generally a Legacy Modern player, and I pretty much just grabbed this deck from Ben Friedman and the coaching group at the Mastermind. They have been developing this deck for some time, and so I have no experience in Standard. I'm learning a lot about this. I haven't played Standard since Pro Tour Ixalan, the first one. So I'm just kind of not really sure in a lot of matches, and I do a little guesswork. And generally when I play, I like to feel it sometimes, you know. Sometimes it's got to be there for you. And I was like, if I just draw a second land and I get this Bowmat, especially on the draw, if I catch this Bowmat and get the 2-drop and he doesn't come with a removal spell in the first couple turns, a Spell Pierce could blow him out, just like you saw in that third game with the Jason's Ingenuity.
Yeah.
I mean, not Ingenuity. Jason's
Defeat.
Terrible names.
No, we knew what you meant. Jason's Defeat.
Right.
Yeah, it's been really fun to watch you. We got a chance to have you on camera yesterday, putting on a clinic in Legacy. That's your comfort zone. Here, we've shaken you out of it, but you're still doing great, man. You're X2 now, deep into the tournament.
And I'm having so much fun. This deck is so much fun to play.
Yeah, I got to say, this is the talk of the room as well for the Standard players playing against, and some of them playing this blue-red God Pharaoh's gift deck. You said that you had a testing group that helped develop it? Right.
I actually, I'm one of the coaches in the Mastermind group. I do some coaching, I do some streaming, and it's like me, Ben Friedman, and Adam Yurchik, and then also Simon. We just picked up a new coach, Simon. I'm terrible with names.
Nielsen?
He's from Denmark.
That's Simon Nielsen.
Yes. So he's been great. So he's been working on the deck. He actually streamed it this past week, and after I missed day 2 in Legacy, I was just like, all right, I'll give this a try. Just jumped right into it, borrowed it from somebody in the coaching group, and it's been a great deck.
So, do you think you guys kind of broke it here? I mean, I got to say the conversion rate on that deck seems very strong. Just anecdotally, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but a couple of my friends, I'm local to Seattle. A couple of my friends played it, and they're day 2, they're X1, and I'm just like, this deck seems to be kind of smashing it.
Yeah, we had in our group alone, I think we put like 7 people in day 2 of like the 8 that played it, at X2,
really great.
And people who have never day 2'd in our coaching group, they're in the group trying to get better, and and they're over here day 2 in their first Grand Prix. Some of them putting this deck, and as the group's really good. I got to give the credit all to the group. I play. The way I play, but the deck wouldn't be there if it wasn't for the group. So
I guess you guys are coaching some good advice there. Yeah. She got a 6 out of 8 coming into day 2.
I just hold down the Modern and the Legacy, so they coached me on this one.
Well, Jody, it's been fun watching you play so far this week, and hopefully we get a chance to keep doing that. Good luck for the rest of the tournament, and cross your fingers. Maybe we'll see you in the top 8.
Thanks so much.
All right, buddy.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, that was great, man. I'm going to try to see if I can't get Corbin, he's our showrunner / text writer here, to get a little bit of a feel for how good this deck's actually doing, because, again, it's anecdotal, and it's a little weird, Corey, when we do the coverage, we kind of feel like we're looking at the tournament through like a porthole, right? We don't actually get to see the bigger picture stuff because it's kind of all condensed down to what we see in the feature match area rather than the top tables or out in the tournament at large. But I got to say, at least just my gut is that this deck is kind of running this tournament.
When I was in the tournament, I would look to my left, look to my right, and there were, I'll take an additional combat phase, and I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. Just like left and right, I just see all these Blue-Red God Pharaoh's gift decks, and they're all in day 2, and just everyone is just announcing, basically, I'm going to kill you.
Judge, how many magma sprays am I allowed to put in my deck? All right, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, though, we'll have Time Walk here from round number 13. We'll see you in just a little bit. Hello there, and welcome back to the booth here at GP Seattle. We are in MTG Red Zone, which means we're working our way up to the top 8 cut here in Standard. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe. That's Corey Burkhart, and we are bringing you coverage of Standard here on day 2. We've got Time Walk Magic for you right now. As you can see, we're coming into game number 2 between Rob Pisano and Luckas Pastorinni. Luckas is on red with a little bit of black, if I remember correctly. Not to be confused with the pure mono red. On the other side of the table, what?
Red-green dinos.
What?
So if you haven't been following
Did anybody tell Rob that this is day 2? That he's 10-2? This isn't... What is this red-green dino? What is going on here?
If you have not been following the metagame evolution since the last Grand Prix in person, there was a Mox Monthly that took place on Magic Online, and the 8-0 deck list, red-green dinosaurs, was the 8-0. No Glory Bringers were in the deck.
I do remember that.
Yeah, and I played against it on day 1, and that deck looked fearsome.
Do you mean that in a good way?
I mean, I died on turn 6 in game 1.
Okay.
And it looked really good. Like, I sat there thinking about in sideboarding, how in the world am I going to beat this deck?
Now, is this a deck that runs the Branch Walkers, the Jade Lights, and then also runs kind of the big red threats of the format, like the Phoenix?
Yes.
Where is the dinosaur part coming from?
So the dinosaur part usually comes from Thrashing Brontodon.
Oh, that's my boy.
So Thrashing Brontodon, the 3/4 that can sacrifice itself to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Pretty good against the God Pharaoh Gifts decks. Deathgord Scavenger, a way to deal with these Scrap Heap Scroungers, the Embalm Internalized creatures, God Pharaoh Gifts they can put into the graveyard. Speaking of Thrash UB, there's your boy.
Oh, I love that guy. Stepping on a pirate ship.
So you have the meaty mid-game there with the solid green creatures. And then as you go up the curve, you have the Rekindling Phoenixes, the Regisaur Alphas, Carnage Tyrant sometimes makes the deck, and my personal favorite, Ghalta.
Oh, oh, that's this deck.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I have played against this on Magic. I'm like, what is this guy doing? What is it? I'm like, oh, okay. You made a 12-12. Now I get it.
So Rob in these games is really going to be looking to stifle Lucas's offense and then quickly turn the corner. A lot of what the red-green deck sort of struggles with is games where the opponent goes wide and it struggles to block the creatures from the opponent. Typical green strategy, your creatures just block very well. They hold the fort. And what you need to do is, get ahead on the board presence, and then you take over the battlefield, you take over the game. So what we're seeing here is Rob's going to use the Phoenix to basically block, get it back, and just keep having the Phoenix live on and on and on. And then eventually he's going to turn the corner, a really quick swing with Regisaur Alpha, Ghalta, giving them all haste, things of that nature.
Luckas Pastorinni somehow tried to do the take the exert thing off and then untap my on-crop crasher. Rob's like, no, and took that away.
That's a nifty little piece of sideboard technology there from Luckas.
Oh.
Exiling that Phoenix.
Right, so that thing's just going to get rid of the Phoenix altogether.
An interesting thing here is he's actually trying to suicide his Kenra to potentially get it back on the next turn. Rob might be obliged to block here just to preserve his life total.
That's right. Hour of Glory doing good work there for Luckas Pastorinni. Most people would prefer to play Vraska's Contempt in general because of the wider range of targets that it gives you. But Luckas is not mono red, as I mentioned at the beginning. He's splashing black.
There's a light touch of black, yeah.
Right, and what that means, of course, is that, getting double black is just a lot more difficult for him.
Yeah, I think if I remember correctly, there's 12 black-producing lands in his deck, maybe 13 with some number of Ether Hubs. So actually getting to cast a double black spell, that maybe happens once a game. Otherwise, you really need to draw multiple of your dual lands, essentially, to cast such a spell.
Mm-hmm. And here we go. Earthshaker Kenra is going to make its reappearance out of the graveyard. But it looks like Rob has a response. He's going to use perhaps an Abrade to kill the on-crop Crasher. But that does still have him taking 4 damage. Thrashing Brontodon doing good work here, knocking Luckas down to 17. And look at this, Regisaur Alpha.
There's Reggie.
Reggie's on the table.
So just like I was saying, Rob's got to turn this game around very quickly. Luckas has access to cards like Unlicensed Disintegration, Cut Ribbons, a lot of cards that just allow him to do a bunch of points of chip damage. Rob cannot allow Luckas to draw 3-4 extra cards by trying to leave extra blockers back. He's got to end the game as quickly as he possibly can. And from Lucas's side, he needs to both be applying pressure to get Rob to trade off so he doesn't have as much power to actually threaten lethal back, but also try to preserve his life total enough to give himself access to those draws. So there's this little dance going on.
Yeah. In the meantime, Reggie's going to just trade off for the token that was left over. So Register Alpha hits the bin. Scrap Heap Scrounger, again, we've been noting it, but the mono-red / red-black deck doesn't do a great job on defense necessarily, and you can see why there's another Register Alpha to follow up, and this is going to be a monster attack here from Rob Pisano. He knows he can't get lethal in by attacking with all three, so he's looking over his options on perhaps leaving Thrashing Brontodon back and just attacking for kind of the 2-turn clock here.
Yeah, so since you can't get it done in 1 turn, it's much more important to be safe here, try to figure out, okay, what allows me to survive a removal spell? Because we see Lucas has that Scrap Heap Scrounger. Now he's got 7 power on the battlefield. It's like, okay, what cards are realistically going to kill me here? So Rob's thinking Unlicensed Disintegration, Cut Ribbons. What kind of options here can he actually survive? And Rob figures, okay, I need to leave an extra blocker back.
And that makes a lot of sense because look at this. All of a sudden, 7 power on the battlefield. And cards like Unlicensed Disintegration can pile on a ton of damage while removing a key blocker.
I think Lucas did end up drawing Cut Ribbons, which, had Rob gotten in there with that Brontodon, he actually would be taking lethal damage here. 7 power and then Ribbons
for 2
on the Aftermath for 2 points.
Wow, so smart play by Pisano last turn to not send in that Thrashing Brontodon. It was his first instinct, but it has paid off for him to leave it back. Lucas really doesn't have much of a choice here. He just has to send in and force the block.
Yeah, and if Rob figures it out here to, keep as many creatures alive as possible, he ends up winning it here.
Yeah, he's got a block here.
Yep.
And it actually puts him in a lethal position now because 1 toughness back, but 2 trampling 3/3s means that's going to be the match to Red-Green Dinosaurs, my new favorite deck in the room. Rob Pisano keeps his top 8 dreams alive. Again, we're in MTG Red Zone, and this is the part where people are falling out of top 8 contention. Now, I want to reiterate this. That doesn't mean that their tournament's over, right? I mean, a strong GP finish when you're a tournament grinder can mean pro points plus money. But, when you walk into the room, you have your eyes on the top 8, right? You're not like, all right, let's 11-4 this thing. That's not what's on the menu for a professional player like you.
Yeah, if you're one of the gold level, platinum level pros, Hall of Famers traveling around to some of these Grand Prix, when you walk in the room, your eyes are on the top 8, your eyes are on the trophy. We sort of call the 11-4 the bread and butter, if you will, where it's, you
got some of your money back.
Yeah, you had a solid weekend.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you fell a couple of rounds short. You put in some good effort, but you got to do better next time.
That's right.
Sure, if you pick up your 3rd loss this round, you still have a shot at 12-3. It's a great finish. You pick up some money and some pro points, like you said. But at the end of the day, if you're a professional player and you're falling short like that, it's a little bit of a disappointment, honestly.
That's right. I mean, you put in all your time and effort to get good at this. All right, that's going to do it for our coverage this round. Once again, Corey, I wanted to say thank you. It was great to have you in the booth, and hopefully I'll see you sit next to me again soon. Thanks for taking the time.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. All right, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, though, round 14 here from GP Seattle. Don't go anywhere.